Part 4, Chapter 4, Section 1 of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett, recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 4, Chapter 4, Section 1 Raskolnikov went straight to the house on the canal bank where Sonia lived. It was an old green house of 3 stories. He found the porter and obtained from him vague directions as to the whereabouts of Kapernaumov, the tailor. Having found in the corner of the courtyard the entrance to the dark and narrow staircase, he mounted to the 2nd floor and came out into a gallery that ran round the whole 2nd storey over the yard. While he was wandering in the darkness, uncertain where to turn for Kapernaumov's door, a door opened 3 paces from him. He mechanically took hold of it. "Who is there?" a woman's voice asked uneasily. "It's I, come to see you," answered Raskolnikov, and he walked into the tiny entry. On a broken chair stood a candle in a battered copper candlestick. "It's you? Good heavens!" cried Sonia weakly, and she stood rooted to the spot. "Which is your room? This way?" And Raskolnikov, trying not to look at her, hastened in. A minute later Sonia too came in with the candle, set down the candlestick and, completely disconcerted, stood before him inexpressibly agitated and apparently frightened by his unexpected visit. The colour rushed suddenly to her pale face and tears came into her eyes. She felt sick and ashamed and happy too. Raskolnikov turned away quickly and sat on a chair by the table. He scanned the room in a rapid glance. It was a large but exceedingly low-pitched room, the only one let by the Kapernaumovs, to whose rooms a closed door led in the wall on the left. In the opposite side, on the right-hand wall, was another door, always kept locked. That led to the next flat, which formed a separate lodging. Sonia's room looked like a barn. It was a very irregular quadrangle, and this gave it a grotesque appearance. A wall with 3 windows looking out on to the canal ran aslant, so that one corner formed a very acute angle, and it was difficult to see in it without very strong light. The other corner was disproportionately obtuse. There was scarcely any furniture in the big room. In the corner on the right was a bedstead, beside it nearest the door a chair. A plain deal table, covered by a blue cloth, stood against the same wall, close to the door into the other flat. 2 rush-bottomed chairs stood by the table. On the opposite wall, near the acute angle, stood a small plain wooden chest of drawers, looking, as it were, lost in a desert. That was all there was in the room. The yellow, scratched and shabby wall-paper was black in the corners. It must have been damp and full of fumes in the winter. There was every sign of poverty, even the bedstead had no curtain. Sonia looked in silence at her visitor, who was so attentively and unceremoniously scrutinising her room, and even began at last to tremble with terror as though she was standing before her judge and the arbiter of her destinies. "I am late. It's 11, isn't it?" he asked, still not lifting his eyes. "Yes," muttered Sonia. "Oh, yes, it is," she added hastily, as though in that lay her means of escape. "My landlady's clock has just struck. I heard it myself. I've come to you for the last time," Raskolnikov went on gloomily, "although this was the first time. I may perhaps not see you again." "Are you going away?" "I don't know. To morrow." "Then you are not coming to Katerina Ivanovna to morrow?" Sonia's voice shook. "I don't know. I shall know to morrow morning. Never mind that. I've come to say one word." He raised his brooding eyes to her and suddenly noticed that he was sitting down while she was all the while standing before him. "Why are you standing? Sit down," he said in a changed voice, gentle and friendly. She sat down. He looked kindly and almost compassionately at her. "How thin you are! What a hand! Quite transparent, like a dead hand." He took her hand. Sonia smiled faintly. "I have always been like that," she said. "Even when you lived at home?" "Yes." "Of course you were," he added abruptly, and the expression of his face and the sound of his voice changed again suddenly. He looked round him once more. "You rent this room from the Kapernaumovs?" "Yes." "They live there? Through that door?" "Yes." "They have another room like this?" "All in one room?" "Yes." "I should be afraid in your room at night," he observed gloomily. "They are very good people, very kind," answered Sonia, who still seemed bewildered. "And all the furniture, everything is theirs. And they are very kind, and the children, too, often come to see me." "They all stammer, don't they?" "Yes, he stammers and he's lame, and his wife too. It's not exactly that she stammers, but she can't speak plainly. She's a very kind woman. And he used to be a house serf. And there are 7 children, and it's only the eldest one that stammers and the others are simply ill, but they don't stammer. But where did you hear about them?" she added with some surprise. "Your father told me then. He told me all about you, and how you went out at 6 o'clock and came back at 9, and how Katerina Ivanovna knelt down by your bed." Sonia was confused. "I fancied I saw him to day," she whispered hesitatingly. "Whom?" "Father. I was walking in the street, out there at the corner, about 10 o'clock, and he seemed to be walking in front. It looked just like him. I wanted to go to Katerina Ivanovna." "You were walking in the streets?" "Yes," Sonia whispered abruptly, again overcome with confusion and looking down. "Katerina Ivanovna used to beat you, I dare say?" "Oh, no! What are you saying? No!" Sonia looked at him almost with dismay. "You love her, then?" "Love her? Of course," said Sonia with plaintive emphasis, and she clasped her hands in distress. "Ah, you don't... if you only knew! You see, she is quite like a child, her mind is quite unhinged, you see, from sorrow. And how clever she used to be, how generous, how kind! Ah, you don't understand, you don't understand!" Sonia said this as though in despair, wringing her hands in excitement and distress. Her pale cheeks flushed, there was a look of anguish in her eyes. It was clear that she was stirred to the very depths, that she was longing to speak, to champion, to express something. A sort of insatiable compassion, if one may so express it, was reflected in every feature of her face. "Beat me? How can you? Good heavens, beat me? And if she did beat me, what then? What of it? You know nothing, nothing about it. She is so unhappy. Ah, how unhappy! And ill. She is seeking righteousness. She is pure. She has such faith that there must be righteousness everywhere and she expects it. And if you were to torture her, she wouldn't do wrong. She doesn't see that it's impossible for people to be righteous and she is angry at it. Like a child, she is good." "And what will happen to you?" Sonia looked at him inquiringly. "They are left on your hands, you see. They were all on your hands before, though. And your father came to you to beg for drink. Well, how will it be now?" "I don't know," Sonia articulated mournfully. "Will they stay there?" "I don't know. They are in debt for the lodging, but the landlady, I hear, said to day that she wanted to get rid of them, and Katerina Ivanovna says that she won't stay another minute." "How is it she is so bold? She relies upon you?" "Oh, no, don't talk like that. We are one, we live like one." Sonia was agitated again and even angry, as though a canary or some other little bird were to be angry. "And what could she do? What could she do?" she persisted, getting hot and excited. "And how she cried to day! Her mind is unhinged. Haven't you noticed it? At one minute she is worrying like a child that everything should be right to morrow, the lunch and all that. Then she is wringing her hands, spitting blood, weeping, and all at once she will begin knocking her head against the wall in despair. Then she will be comforted again. She builds all her hopes on you. She says that you will help her now, and that she will borrow a little money somewhere and go to her native town with me and set up a boarding school for the daughters of gentlemen, and take me to superintend it, and we will begin a new splendid life. And she kisses and hugs me, comforts me, and you know she has such faith in her fancies, one can't contradict her. And all the day long she has been washing, cleaning, mending. She dragged the wash tub into the room with her feeble hands and sank on the bed, gasping for breath. We went this morning to the shops to buy shoes for Polenka and Lida, for theirs are quite worn out. Only the money we'd reckoned wasn't enough, not nearly enough, and she picked out such dear little boots, for she has taste, you don't know, and there in the shop she burst out crying before the shopmen because she hadn't enough. Ah, it was sad to see her." "Well, after that I can understand your living like this," Raskolnikov said with a bitter smile. "And aren't you sorry for them? Aren't you sorry?" Sonia flew at him again. Why, I know, you gave your last penny yourself, though you'd seen nothing of it, and if you'd seen everything, oh, dear! And how often I've brought her to tears, only last week! Yes, I! Only a week before his death. I was cruel, and how often I've done it! Ah, I've been wretched at the thought of it all day." Sonia wrung her hands as she spoke at the pain of remembering it. "You were cruel?" "Yes, I. I went to see them," she went on, weeping, "and father said, 'Read me something, Sonia. My head aches, read to me. Here's a book.' He had a book he had got from Andrey Semyonovitch Lebeziatnikov. He lives there. He always used to get hold of such funny books. And I said I can't stay, as I didn't want to read, and I'd gone in chiefly to show Katerina Ivanovna some collars. Lizaveta the pedlar sold me some collars and cuffs cheap, pretty, new, embroidered ones. Katerina Ivanovna liked them very much. She put them on and looked at herself in the glass and was delighted with them. 'Make me a present of them, Sonia,' she said. 'Please do.' 'Please do,' she said. She wanted them so much. And when could she wear them? They just reminded her of her old happy days. She looked at herself in the glass, admired herself, and she has no clothes at all, no things of her own, hasn't had all these years. And she never asks anyone for anything, she's proud, she'd sooner give away everything. And these she asked for, she liked them so much, and I was sorry to give them. 'What use are they to you, Katerina Ivanovna?' I said. I spoke like that to her. I ought not to have said that. She gave me such a look. And she was so grieved at my refusing her, and it was so sad to see. And she was not grieved for the collars, but for my refusing. I saw that. Ah, if only I could bring it all back, change it, take back those words. Ah, if I... But it's nothing to you." "Did you know Lizaveta the pedlar?" "Yes. Did you know her?" Sonia asked with some surprise. "Katerina Ivanovna is in consumption, rapid consumption, she will soon die," said Raskolnikov after a pause, without answering her question. "Oh, no, no, no!" And Sonia unconsciously clutched both his hands as though imploring that she should not. "But it will be better if she does die." "No, not better, not at all better," Sonia unconsciously repeated in dismay. "And the children? What can you do except take them to live with you?" "Oh, I don't know," cried Sonia, almost in despair, and she put her hands to her head. It was evident that that idea had very often occurred to her before and he had only roused it again. "And what if, even now, while Katerina Ivanovna is alive, you get ill and are taken to the hospital? What will happen then?" he persisted pitilessly. "How can you? That cannot be!" And Sonia's face worked with awful terror. "Cannot be?" Raskolnikov went on with a harsh smile. "You are not insured against it, are you? What will happen to them then? They will be in the street, all of them. She will cough and beg and knock her head against some wall, as she did to day, and the children will cry. Then she will fall down, be taken to the police station and to the hospital, she will die, and the children... Oh, no! God will not let it be!" broke at last from Sonia's overburdened bosom. She listened, looking imploringly at him, clasping her hands in dumb entreaty as though it all depended upon him. Raskolnikov got up and began to walk about the room. A minute passed. Sonia was standing with her hands and her head hanging in terrible dejection. "And can't you save? Put by for a rainy day?" he asked, stopping suddenly before her. "No," whispered Sonia. "Of course not. Have you tried?" he added, almost ironically. "Yes." "And it didn't come off?" "Of course not. No need to ask." And again he paced the room. Another minute passed. "You don't get money every day?" Sonia was more confused than ever, and colour rushed into her face again. "No," she whispered with a painful effort. "It will be the same with Polenka, no doubt," he said suddenly. "No, no, it can't be, no!" Sonia cried aloud in desperation, as though she had been stabbed. "God would not allow anything so awful." "He lets others come to it." "No, no, God will protect her, God!" she repeated beside herself. "But perhaps there is no God at all," Raskolnikov answered, with a sort of malignance, laughed and looked at her. Sonia's face suddenly changed. A tremor passed over it. She looked at him with unutterable reproach, tried to say something, but could not speak and broke into bitter, bitter sobs, hiding her face in her hands. "You say Katerina Ivanovna's mind is unhinged, your own mind is unhinged," he said, after a brief silence. 5 minutes passed. He still paced up and down the room in silence, not looking at her. At last he went up to her. His eyes glittered. He put his two hands on her shoulders and looked straight into her tearful face. His eyes were hard, feverish and piercing, his lips were twitching. All at once he bent down quickly and dropping to the ground, kissed her foot. Sonia drew back from him as from a madman. And certainly he looked like a madman. "What are you doing to me?" she muttered, turning pale, and a sudden anguish clutched at her heart. He stood up at once. "I did not bow down to you. I bowed down to all the suffering of humanity," he said wildly, and walked away to the window. "Listen," he added, turning to her a minute later. "I said just now to an insolent man that he was not worth your little finger, and that I did my sister honour by making her sit beside you." "Ah, you said that to them? And in her presence?" cried Sonia, frightened. "Sit down with me and honour? Why, I'm... dishonourable! Ah, why did you say that?" End of Part 4, Chapter 4, Section 1. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.